Good afternoon. Me back again. Time for Frost Hollow Hall, our next instalment. And we're on chapter 3, which is entitled The Other Side. Black, stinking water spewed over the ice. It sucked at my skirts. And it was cold. So cold it knocked the breath clean out of me. Another great cracking sound and the ice gave way. I clawed like a mad cat, but there was nothing to get hold of. The water kept tugging. My clothes grew heavy. Slowly, gently, the lake closed over my head and all went quiet but for the blood pounding in my ears. I went down and down into blackness. My chest was too tight. I couldn't breathe. Then my feet touched something soft. I stopped sinking. Panic kicked in. I thrashed and flailed. Mud got in my mouth, my eyes. Then somehow I was swimming up towards daylight. I saw sky and trees, all blurred through the ice. My lungs felt fit to burst. Help me! Help me! I lashed out madly, but there were no cracks or holes here. The ice stayed solid as marble above me. Dark spots danced before my eyes. Arms, legs, head, everything went weary. All I wanted to do was sleep. I pictured Pa come home at last and wondering where I was, and Eliza and Ma looking at the clock and starting supper without me. The queerest feeling came over me. Something warm, like a person's breath, tickled my cheek, and I was no longer fighting for air. The water now seemed full of the strangest pearly light. A boy in a billowing white shirt floated towards me. I wondered if I was dead, if I'd crossed over to the other side and this was an angel coming to meet me. He was the most perfect creature I'd ever seen. His golden hair moved gently with the currents, and his eyes were strange, beautiful things coloured like lavender. As he came closer, the light followed, as if it was coming from right inside him. I stared. I couldn't move. He stared back, his eyes all wide at the sight of me. He reached for my hand. His skin felt icy cold, but his hold was steady. If I was dead now, it didn't matter. Here was my very own angel, beautiful and full of light. He took my other hand and pulled me away from the deeper water. I let him take me. I knew I'd go anywhere with him. Then as grey daylight came through the ice again, I saw we were heading towards the bank. I pulled back. I didn't want to face Will Potter or Ma or Eliza. Right now I didn't even care about Pa. I wanted to stay right here with this beautiful boy. Yet before my very eyes he began to fade, till he was no more than a speck of brightness in the water. I tried to swim after him, but my skirts got caught in the weeds and I couldn't break free. He was gone. Next I knew, I was up on the bank. I saw a pair of feet, then heard Will saying, "Tilly, can you hear me?" Blackness. I sensed I was a bird, high up in a tree, looking down on the lake. Somewhere near the middle was a person-sized hole, all dark like a stain. And over on the bank was a girl, me, sprawled lifeless across the grass. Will Potter was crouched beside me, calling and calling my name. Steam rose off my skirts and my hair. Worked loose, lay wet against my face. Suddenly my whole body jerked into life. I retched water and weeds and goodness knows what all over Will's boots, and he didn't so much as flinch. He thumped my back and kept talking, though his face was stricken and pale. I came back to myself. Head, legs, arms, everything hurt. I swore I'd been jabbed in the ribs 1,000 times. It was agony even to draw breath. My eyelids were stone heavy. All I wanted was to stay still and sleep. But I grew aware of a tugging at my feet, rough fabric pressed up against my cheek. I was jolted this way and that. I sensed darkness, then daylight, then dark again. I came to on a strange doorstep, with Will's arms wrapped tight around me. A buzzing noise filled my head. Everything started to spin. The darkness came back. I woke to the sound of voices. I was lying down on a hard surface. My chest was on fire. As I rolled over to cough, a pan was thrust in my face, ready to catch the foul-tasting water as it streamed from my mouth and nose. The room tipped sideways. I reckoned I was about to throw up. I I shut my eyes until the tipping stopped. Everything went quiet. Next thing I heard was a woman's voice. We'll be for it if she comes in. But look at the state of the child. We can't just fling her back out in the cold, said another. Can you get us a ride to the village? It was Will, sounding far away. I tried to focus my eyes, but it made my head hurt, and I drifted off again. Quick, Mrs. Jessop's coming. The voices were back. This time they sounded sharp and loud. I wondered if I should be scared, but it was too much effort. I slipped back into sleep. I awoke to hear footsteps. A new voice said harshly, Fell through the ice, did she? A hand gripped my shoulder and shook me hard. Is she dead? My eyes flew open. A stranger in a dark frock loomed over me. She didn't look altogether friendly. Then her face turned suddenly pale. Her hand hovered close to my cheek. To slap me or stroke me, I didn't know which. Take her away at once, she said, and was gone. They bundled me out of the door and into the back of a cart. Someone had draped a blanket round my shoulders, and I was mighty glad of it, since by now I couldn't stop shaking. Wide awake at last, I felt sick as a dog, and a thought nudged away at me, but I couldn't for anything work out what it was. Will sat beside me all the way home. I didn't have the strength to protest when he put his arms round me. He was warm and quiet, and after a while I got used to it. When Ma opened our front door, her face was like thunder. Where have you been? She cried. You've been gone hours. Then she saw the state of me and her hand flew to her mouth. Will tried to explain what had happened. It didn't sound good. We were very clearly in the wrong, and I knew I'd be in for a right earful. I'm sorry, Mrs. Higgins, Will said, and finally let go of me. My legs gave way before I could get inside. Next chapter, Dreaming 1. I'm in the middle of a lake. The ice groans. I tilt forward. The water pulls me under. Everything is hushed. Down and down I go in a stream of tiny bubbles. Help me, I cry. No one hears me. The water deadens everything. Darkness closes in. I'm a goner this time, I'm sure of it. Out of nowhere, a light darts towards me like a will-o'-the-wisp. My heart leaps. The light becomes a shape. It's him again, the boy in the white shirt. He stops a few steps away. I see how his hair curls over his collar and how his eyes seek out mine. I've never seen anyone so lovely. I go all fluttery inside. Trouble is, I know what happens next. Any second and he'll lead me to the bank. But I don't want to be saved just yet. I want to stay here like this. He comes closer. I can barely meet his eye. It's then I see how sad he looks. Something is clearly very wrong. Tilly, he says. How do I hear him? And how on earth does he know my name? Chapter 4. Following a Dream. Early next morning I woke with a start. Thin grey light filled the room. It took me a moment to gather my wits and realise I was safe at home in bed. Behind the old curtain that split the room in half, Ma and Pa would still be asleep. Eliza lay next to me snoring, and I was glad of her all familiar and warm, even though she had more than her share of the blankets. The dream left me feeling strange. My shift was damp with sweat and my heart thudded uncomfortably. What's more, a thought had lodged inside my brain, going round and round like a moth bumping at a lamp. It was such a mad idea. No one would ever believe it. They'd laugh right in my face. I shut my eyes. I tried to go back to sleep, but the thought wouldn't go away. Something, someone, had been out there in the lake. What's more, he'd saved my life. Just when I'd been breathing my last, he'd appeared out of nowhere, all lit up like a star. Yet if he'd really been an angel, he'd have taken me up to heaven. I'd have gone with him too. Instead, he took me back to the lake edge so that I might live. Now he was here in my dreams, only it shocked me to see him so changed. There was real pain and sorrow in his face. What's more, he knew my name. How the heck was that possible? It didn't make sense. Not one bit. From behind the curtain came sounds that Ma was stirring. her little cough and the wince as her feet touched the ice-cold floor. No sound yet from Pa, but knowing he was here lifted my spirits, and I couldn't lie still any longer. The cold made me dress fast, tugging on my everyday frock, which was too short and too tight under the arms. Just the effort of it made me dizzy, and I grabbed hold of the bedstead until the feeling passed. Ma called out, "Tilly, that you?" "Yes, it's me. You well enough for work?" My eyes smarted with tears. A kind word wouldn't go amiss, but she was cross with me, and I suppose I deserved it. "I reckon so," I said, because this was the answer she wanted. It wasn't much of a job I had, just a pupil helper at the village school, cleaning slates and carrying coal and showing the young ones how to read. But it brought in some pennies, and it meant I got quite clever at my letters. I heard rustling as Ma reached for her clothes. "You were a little fool yesterday," she said sharply. I braced myself, hoping she'd be quick with her telling off. "Fancy going to Frost Hollow Hall," she said, yanking on her frock. "Of all the places! Don't you know nothing?" I wondered if Pa might wake up soon and take my side, but Ma wasn't finished yet. "It could have cost you dear going up there on that ice. You're lucky to be here at all." Right now I didn't feel it. Ma appeared from behind the curtain. She looked like she'd hardly slept a wink. "You and that Will Potter's both to blame, you silly beggars. Honestly, Tilly, I'd have thought you'd know better." Wait a minute. Hadn't she urged me to go with him? I certainly hadn't wanted to go, not till I'd seen his skates, and I was just about to say so when I caught sight of the empty bed behind her. Pa must be already up. Perhaps he'd made us a surprise breakfast with fresh bread and bacon and hot sweet tea. He'd done such a thing once before. Yet there was no special meal on the table. There was no Pa neither. He still hadn't come home. Breakfast was stale bread and cheese with the blue bits cut off. "Blame your father," said Ma, slamming plates down on the table. "Due home yesterday with 6 weeks' earnings. No word from him. What the heck's he playing at?" She only ever mentioned the money. All this time he'd been away, and not once had she said she missed him. Perhaps he's only... Eliza interrupted me. "Don't stick up for him. He'll be sleeping it off under a hedge somewhere, or following one of his big dreams." I'd have got a thick ear for saying such things. Not Eliza. As far as Ma was concerned, she could say what she flipping well liked. At least Pa had dreams. He didn't want to be poor forever. Why would he? I didn't see it making us very happy. "Well, eat up," Ma said, "and don't count on nothing for supper." I wasn't hungry. It was enough that Pa wasn't here. My dream was still troubling me too. It hung over me like a fog, making it hard to think about anything else. "You seeing Will Potter today, Tilly?" Eliza asked. "No. Why should I?" "Oh, I thought you two was courting now." It was a dare, nothing else. I knew she was ragging me for a reaction, but really Will Potter was the least of my worries. She narrowed her eyes at me, chewing slowly. "Well, you look like you've seen a ghost, and you was twitching and turning in your sleep last night too." "What do you mean?" I said, uneasy. "And stop shredding that bread," said Ma. "Eat it or leave it so someone else can have it." It was a measly slice to start with, although Eliza seemed to have landed herself a decent-sized chunk. Even her cheese looked passable. I pushed my plate away. Here we were then, just like always. Eliza and Ma on one side, me on the other. Except I didn't feel right, and I needed to tell someone, though I'd no idea how to put it into words. "I've just had the queerest dream," I said. "Oh, aye," said Ma, only half listening. "I was in the lake again and couldn't get out. There was a boy under the water, and he seemed so, well, sad. I mean proper, heartbroken sad." Ma tutted. "Perhaps that'll learn you then. You shouldn't have gone poking about up there in the first place." She moved to the window where the light was best and picked up her sewing work. I waited for her to start chiding me again. She didn't. But Eliza had stopped eating. Her eyes were fixed on me. Christopher Barrington. She said his name dead slow, savouring it like it was something tasty. "What about him?" I said. "He drowned in that lake, didn't he, Ma?" "Don't start filling her head with nonsense. She's in her own little world as it is." I am not, I said, surprised Ma had even noticed. Eliza carried on. Kit, they called him, short for Christopher. Sad that he died so young. He was quite a looker, I've heard. Oh, Eliza, Ma said. Well, it's true. Got his looks from his mother, apparently. She's meant to be a right beauty, though no one's seen her for years. Why are you telling me this? I said, because I'd heard it all before. Everyone in Froscombe knew the story. Kip Barrington was the rich, handsome heir to Frost Hollow Hall. An only child, he drowned in the lake, and his mother was quite broken by his death. She shut herself away from the world in her big old house, and was still up there now, to this day. To me, it seemed a sad sort of tale. To Eliza, it was pure sensation, right out of a penny dreadful story. She loved a gruesome yarn, where beautiful people met with grisly ends and ghosts came back from the grave to spread secrets. And by the way she sat forward in her seat, she was certainly warming to her theme. Ma had stopped sewing too. It was a terrible business for Lady Barrington losing her only child, she said quietly. Folks say the house is a queer place. No one wants to work there nowadays. Word is they've hardly got enough staff to keep the place going. A little shiver passed over me. I didn't know this part of things, and it wasn't like Ma to gossip. What sort of strange? Said Eliza eagerly. Ma started sewing again. Oh, I don't know. He's buried up there, isn't he? Got their own fancy graveyard, so I heard. Enough now, said Ma, quite sternly, so that even Eliza took heed. This is tittle-tattle, and I've got work to do, and so have you two. If your father don't turn up soon, we'll be fending for ourselves. We owe 4 weeks' rent as it is. I hardly needed reminding. A cold sweat prickled my brow. I stood up too fast, sending knives and spoons crashing to the floor. Careful, girl, watch what you're about, cried Ma. I need some air, I said. I'm all right, really. Eliza gave me a long look. You're jumpy as anything. No, I ain't. Oh, yes, you are, she laughed. Fancy dreaming about a dead boy. That's right queer, that is. I'd heard enough. It weren't your Kip Barrington in my dreams. If you must know, it was... I stopped short, not knowing what to say. Eliza sat back in her seat, smirking. Go on, then. Who was it? Will Potter? Shut up, I ain't telling you no more about it. Suit yourself. God, how I wanted to throttle her. I'm going to work, I said, feeling sicker than ever. I didn't even make it to the door. My eyes went all fuzzy and the ground swung up to meet me. When I came to, Ma was gazing down at me. You ain't going nowhere, she said. She didn't look too happy about it neither. Chapter 5. Ghosts and Angels. I spent the morning dozing in a chair by the fire. There wasn't much left to burn on it, but it was the warmest spot in the house. With Eliza gone to her job at the mill and Ma down in the village pleading for credit at the shop, time passed quietly enough. Then near midday someone knocked at our door. Thinking it might be the landlord, my stomach dropped. I opened the door just a crack. Will Potter was on the doorstep. You've got some net coming round here, I said. He grinned. And you look peaky. Not working today, then? It struck me as a daft thing to say. Does it look like it? I said. Bit cold out here, said Will pointedly. I'd no plans to let him in, but he'd already got 1 foot past the door, so it was hard to protest when he grasped my arms and steered me back inside. I shrugged him off and sat down again. As he settled into the chair opposite, all easy and relaxed, I wondered how I'd ever get rid of him. He started nattering on about his pa's butcher's shop. Wasn't it funny how a dog had run off with a string of sausages? Lucky dog, I muttered, thinking of my own sorry breakfast. Then, with a flourish, he pulled something from his pocket, held it towards me on the palm of his hand. It was a snowdrop, looking rather the worse for wear. The petals were crumpled, and the flower's head was almost flat. Is this a joke? No. His face fell. It's the first one I've seen. I thought you might like it. I stared at him. Why are you here? To see how you are, he said, and for once he seemed almost serious. I raised my arms weakly. Well, here I am, still alive. Will gazed at me for so long I felt myself grow hot. Then he said, You nearly drowned in that lake. I couldn't reach you, though I tried and tried. My stomach turned. I preferred it when he larked about. You're very lucky to be alive, Tilly, he said, his eyes still on me. You know that, don't you? A beautiful angel had saved my life. I was lucky. My palms were sweating now and my heart began to thud. Perhaps Will knew more than he was letting on. Maybe he'd seen the angel too. I was desperate to share it with someone. Will, at the lake yesterday, did you notice... I trailed off. Did I notice what? What would I tell him? That an angel took my hand and guided me to safety. Heck, I'd tried to explain it to my own family and hadn't got very far. I couldn't tell Will Potter, as if he'd believe me when I hardly believed it myself. Doesn't matter, I said. We stared into the fire. I went back to Frost Hollow Hall this morning to thank them, said Will. Thank who? For what? The kitchen staff for taking you in. I was having trouble keeping up, but in a dark corner of my brain something stirred and a hazy sort of memory came back to me. We went there yesterday, did we? I said with a shiver. Of course we did. Don't you remember? What I mean is, did we go inside the house? I've just said so, haven't I? I doubted even a cad like Will Potter could charm his way into Frost Hollow Hall, not if there were men with dogs and sticks. But he seemed a bit too familiar with the place for my liking. Something didn't add up. You know the hall quite well, I said. My pa delivers meat up there, and sometimes I help him. Why? So you know the family then? No, I never see the Barringtons. So how come we ended up there? In the kitchens, weren't it? Look, I know Cook, and she's a good sort. The maids are all right too. They weren't that friendly, I said, remembering that face looming over me. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jessup, you mean? Come to think of it, she did take a strange turn when she saw you. I stared at him in disbelief. So you do know them, don't you? He shrugged. I know some of the staff a bit, yes. I couldn't hold back any more. I let rip. Some flipping dare that was then. What do you mean? Ooh, Frost Hollow Hall, I cried. The big spooky place what no one goes near. Will moved uneasily in his seat. So? But in fact you do go there, and you know the staff. How the heck does that make it any sort of dare at all? Easy, Tilly. Calm down. Calm down? Why didn't you just get us an invite to tea? It would have been a flip sight easier. But no one goes near that lake. Not since Master Barrington died, said Will. And there's other things too. Dark, queer stuff. And now there's even talk of a ghost. I heard all about it today. Huh? And I bet no one's ever seen it. One of the maids says she has. Some plates got broke last night and she swears they just flew off the shelf at her. But I don't think the others believed her. I shut my eyes and took a deep breath. Suddenly I felt very tired. Will, I said, I nearly died up there. I know, he said, looking very shifty indeed, and I feel awful about it. I really do. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And he got to his feet. I'll see myself out. You do that. He'd almost got to the door when he stopped and said, But you didn't die, did you? Someone's watching over you, Tilly Higgins. That's it for today. More tomorrow. Hope you're enjoying this story. See you soon. Bye.